Yo guys, Better Babbit here and welcome back to another episode. So today we are in the lovely Battersea Park on our way to play some paddle. We have just played an online session and it went terribly. Lost about 8 or 9 buy-ins and about 700 hands. No fun at all. Then we're hopefully going to go play a 5-10-25, more likely to be a 2-5-10 I would say, at the Vic Casino in Edgware Road in London with some of the boys. There's going to be some notable names there, maybe Ishtar 11, maybe 2000 kg, maybe Smith Dude. So needless to say, it's not going to be very soft, but I am very much looking forward to it. So I will see you soon. We arrive at the lovely Victoria Casino at just after 4:30 PM after playing paddle, and we are raring to grind. Sadly, the prospect of the toughest lineup in London didn't come to fruition, and it's just going to have to be me and Smith Dude battling it out in the streets today. Our first hand comes just 15 minutes into our session where we're still playing 2-5-10. String bet. Yeah. Fucking string better. No string a bell. No strings attached. Smith opens to 30 under the gun, the button, big blind, call, and I defend my straddle with 9-7 of hearts. We see a little bit of something on the 10-6-5 with 2 diamonds and a heart, giving us a backdoor flush draw and a gut shot, and it checks through. Turn we see a spicy jack of hearts, giving us a flush draw to go with our gutter. Checks to me, and I think betting is totally fine here, but I suspect Smith, who is a very good player, will bet fairly often in this situation after probably checking quite a lot on the flop, so I do decide to check to him. When I do, he does fire out for £100 and it folds round to me. I can definitely just call here, but I think forcing Smith into a horrible spot with his one pair region, which is probably close to the entirety of his range, I would guess, is going to be the play. I make a very big raise to £475. Smith thinks about it for a little while and ends up calling. We're definitely going to need some help on the river here, and lo and behold, we bang off the absolute dream 8 of spades on the river, bricking both flush draws. After a little bit of posturing from me, we shove for about 1800 effective. All in. Smith does sadly snap fold, but I am going to roll it over and show him that we had it this time. Definitely not the worst start to the session at all. You like this river? The second hand comes not long after, and again we're in the straddle, but this time with a slightly improved Queen 10 offsuit. It folds around to the cutoff, who makes it £35, and the big blind, who is a relative unknown, but from what I could tell after 30 minutes or so, was quite obviously a passive recreational. They call, and I complete the straddle with my Queen 10 offsuit. Why is that? Flop comes Queen Jack 9 rainbow, and we see a very quick lead of £100 from the passive big blind. Alarm bells are already ringing at this point, and then I look down at his stack and I realise he only has £331 after the 100, or 43 big blinds total. I don't really see any other option here but to call, although I am far from thrilled. The cutoff folds, and we see a 3 bringing a flush draw. The big blind now quickly cuts out £150, leaving £181 behind. I guess we could figure out the pot odds here and the equity, but to be honest with you, not only did I not come to play live poker to fold top pair and an open-ender, but I don't really have any confidence in my reads on this player. In the end, I do decide I'm just going to call because I want to keep these hypothetical bluffs in the opponent's rage, and I do just call. Yeah, Ben. River is a meaningless 7, and big blind wastes no time shoving the last 18 big blinds, or £181. At this point, if he's got me, and I am always just going to call, so I flick it in, and I do get a glimmer of hope in the shake of my opponent's head before he does roll over ace-queen offsuit for the absolute ownage. Very good hand, sir. And that's going to be the last hand of the 2-5-10 before heading out for dinner. We ended up about £200 in profit for the first leg. About an hour and a half later, we are lucky to come back to a 10-25 that started, and fortunately we slip right into our seats. I top up the entirety of my bankroll that day, which is £6,000, or about 220-ish big blinds. Sadly, if we do happen to dust it all off, we are going to have to slither away from the table because that is all the money we are able to get into the casino on that day. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. When do I ever have anything, mate? Our first hand at the new table comes exactly 2 orbits into the game, and as my boy Gazzy B would say, we pick up the Kardashians on the button. We go ahead and open up to £60 and a reg and a friend of Smith defends the big blind. Now this reg had been involved in the first few hands and there had been a few big pots as well, but there weren't really any showdowns, so I don't have any reliable reads at this point other than they seem to be playing cards and not super on the very nitty side. And we're roughly 5k effective. We flop the absolute stone cold Steve Austin on King 7-3 Rainbow, and when the reg checks it on over to us, I just decide to range bet for £40. To my absolute delight, they cut out a raise and make it £150. Now, I think at 100 big blinds, this is just going to be the clearest call of all time, but we aren't 100 big blinds deep, we are 200 big blinds deep. And the other thought that was going through my mind at the time, I do believe that live players are going to be under check raising the flop. I feel that live players are likely to miss these kind of mergy check raises with like the 3x and the 7x, and they're going to be much more very two-pair strong hand heavy, as well as some gut shots as well. To be honest with you, this is probably me projecting and me making assumptions, but I would be really interested to hear whether or not they feel what I'm saying has any truth or not. So with that in mind and me assuming that their range is going to be much more contained of hands that are going to continue versus the 3-bet, I get out my absolute Tracy Beaker and make it £375. To my delight, and I nearly fall out of my chair when they do this, they start cutting out more chips and they make it £875. To be honest, at this point, I'm like 95% sure that they have 7s or 3s, but I think there is probably a 5%, around a 5% chance that there are some crazy spew with, I don't know, a pair of 7s or a 3 or something like that. Once I call and we go to the turn, we see the Jack of Hearts bringing a flush draw, and Villain tanks a little bit before make it £1,150. To be honest with you, I don't really expect anyone to continue bluffing here with absolutely no history, but the voice in my head reminded me that I'd be posting this on YouTube, and I didn't want to get even more ridiculed than I already will be for 3-betting the flop, so I decided to avoid the public humiliation. I call and we see a pretty innocuous 10 on the river. Obviously Queen 9 and Ace Queen fill up. I don't think OOP ever has either of those hands. Villain postures for a while before jamming in around 2.8k. We obviously snap call and show our kings, and in a not so surprising turn of events, Villain does roll over the pocket 7s for the misery cooler.
All that advertising. I get the King 7 free rainbow.
Unlucky. It's disgusting.
I think that makes it in there.
I think that makes it in.
Unlucky. It's just disgusting.
Alright, next hand is going to be...
Shit going on.
Yeah, I know.
Next hand is going to be 1025, no bonuses, no...
I think it's safe to say that after 5 months of absolute horseshit online, I'm already considering a career change to playing live poker at the Vic. Next up, we're on the button with Queen Jack of Spades, and a recreational player opens up to £75 from MP, and we 3-bet to £200, and they call out of their £1,150 stack. Flop comes 10-5 deuce with 1 spade, and when he checks it on over to us, I think we could definitely check back here, but I think a lot of good things can happen when we bet. We can make him fold better hands and also have plenty of turns that we can put max pressure on. We bet £200 and he looks extremely uncomfortable. He looks like he's on the verge of folding, similar to the last guy in the last hand, but then out of absolutely nowhere, picks up 200 quid and flicks in the call. Really hoping to pick up a turn we can jam on now. Turn is a very pleasing 6 of spades, giving us a flush draw, and when he checks it on over to us, I think we only have one option here, and that is to shove in our last £650. He still looks fairly reluctant putting the money in, but puts it in much quicker on the turn than he did on the flop, and we agree to run it twice. First river gives us a very nice top pair, and assuming I have the best hand there, and then the river on the second one bricks out. I roll over my hand expecting to win 1 and also being quite interested to see his hand. I'm assuming a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 8s is probably the most likely. But to my surprise, I realised I was in woeful shape as he rolls over the old ace 9 of spades for the over flush draw and the check call on the flop. But we will absolutely take half the pot here. Just a couple of orbits later, we look down at King Jack offsuit and we make it £60 in MP. The cutoff, who is a semi-reg, calls. Button recreational, big blind recreational. I know this game is an actual juice fest, come along. Flop comes a very underwhelming Queen 8-4 monotone, and we have no suits. It checks around to the cutoff, who looks pretty interested in betting, but for some reason ends up checking. When they do this, I kind of feel that their range is maybe a hand like Queen X, or maybe a hand like Pocket Nines with a club, or something like that. The button and the big blind may as well already have their cards in the muck, because they couldn't be less interested in this pot if they tried. So when the turn brings the ace of clubs, putting a 4 flush out there, and it checks to me, I decide that blasting turn and river here is probably just going to be the play. Or should I say, betting the turn and blasting the river on some rivers is going to be the play. I don't want to bet turn too big, not only because I think that the 2 recreationals in the hand have very weak hands and they're probably going to fold mostly anyway. And if they do call with like a low club, I can make them fold on the river. But also the cutoff, who was in the hand, who wanted to bet the flop. I do think by betting small, we get quite good range defining qualities that we can then decide on the river how big or how often we want to bet on some rivers. So I decided to bet quarter pot on the turn, and only the cutoff calls, and both recreationals in a shocking turn of events snap fold. So the river is a meaningless 9, and I think the correct sizing here is going to be overbet. But I've actually seen this player. I played with this player a few weeks before, and then I played with them this day as well. I've seen them get pretty damn curious versus very big bets on a few occasions. I decided that 2/3 pot is just going to be the max fold equity size. It's kind of the size that doesn't look suspicious, but also looks rather value heavy. And also going too small just induces calls from like all of those clubs, which I definitely don't want to be doing. The other thing to mention here is that I don't care about being balanced at all. To be honest with you, what I'm saying here aren't really very good justifications. They're just kind of more like exploit feelings at the time. I don't know. Let's just put it down to woo-woo at this point. I do decide to bet 2/3 on the river, and he does tank for a little bit. He looks reluctant to fold and ends up folding and says,
Do I have a king? Yes. I do have a king.
Against 2 batteries, please.
I have a king of diamonds.
So that was the last hand of this session, but I did play it again the day after, which I had no real interesting hands, but I just wanted to share one hand from that session before wrapping up with my results over the 2 days. We're in the big blind playing 10-25, and it folds all the way around to the recreational and the small blind, who limps in. We look down at a very boring Jack-5 offsuit and decide to check. We see a very good 10-5-5 rainbow, and the recreational very quickly leads out for full pot, which is £50. I have absolutely no reads on this player at all. I think the standard option is to raise here, but I definitely don't think calling and seeing kind of what develops is also bad. So I decide to just call on this occasion. The turn is a 6 bringing a flush draw, and when the recreational quickly checks it on over to us, I definitely now just want to be building the pot and betting as big as possible without scaring them off a 10 or something like that, so I decide to pot the turn for 150. They don't waste much time in making the call. We see a very bricky offsuit 3 on the river, and I'm preparing myself to overbet the river when checked to. However, I never actually get that opportunity because the recreational and the small blind now leads out for £250. I think we can all agree that this is definitely just the clearest raise of all time, but also it's potentially a little bit scary. This isn't a small lead on the river. It's about 2/3 pot, so there can definitely be some okay hands in there. But obviously we do beat a load of 5x, a hand like 7-5, 8-5, 9-5, those kind of hands. So I think that we can definitely get called by worse here. Even a hand like pocket aces, for example, may well just bet call the river. With all that in mind, I decide to make it fairly big, but we don't want to make them fold out hands that they think are value catchers, so I make it £875. Instead of analysing the rest of the hand, I will leave the rest of the thoughts from my opponent and myself and the rest of the hand.
I think they're looking at him from because I watched the thing from a perspective of when he was managing, when he had when he was playing good football. So with more
normally
resources.
I would raise,
but still,
but because I'm very unlucky now in the last few days, I just called.
I think you win then.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice hand. I have a 5.
Our good friend in the small blind there definitely got us very well, so very nice hand to them. Let's head off into the outro and talk about our final results over those couple of sessions.
Yo guys, reporting here from the Lake District after a very relaxing week off the grind. In that last week before I left London, I played lots of live and lots of online, lots of late nights. It was definitely in need of a break. But let's get to the result. In that first session, one with the pocket kings versus pocket sevens, we won about 4.5k. The second session, which was that very boring session where I only had the jack 5 offsuit as the only interesting hand, we lost about 1.5k. And then there was another very short session earlier that week where I won about 600, but no interesting hands to note there. Do let me know if you like this form of content. I really want to make more live stuff and also maybe a bit more lifestyle stuff as well. So if you do have any ideas or any recommendations or any feedback on today's video, definitely do let me know in the comments below. But until next time, take care and I will see you at the tables.